with equal numbers in Parliament for crucial votes on which the NDC promised that it will stick to principle and support many Ghanaians who say the government must not continue to bloat its size. The NDC was embarrassed. A gross of about 31 of its members, almost a quarter of its members, average 20 of its members, voted in favor of the decision of the president in appointing 6 new ministers. What is going on within the NDC as its members of parliament, some of them have taken to social media to speak about their disappointment. Some call what happened treachery. The NPP seems to suggest that this is a sign that breaking the eighth is not as difficult as some of you may think. Question: do the MPs represent you or themselves? The president has made some appointments and sworn in 3 new members onto the Independent Electoral Commission of Ghana. There are concerns that the president has tainted the neutrality and independence of the Electoral Commission by appointing people, including members of his party, into the institution that is supposed to be neutral, independent, particularly going into the election 2024. The president, again, has set the police on galamseyers in his office. One of their own and a former appointee of his has said that the galamsey fight is not being won because he was booted out, Professor Frimpong Boateng, and it is business as usual. And some of the kingpins, he says, are within the party and within the presidency. What is your faith in the police in doing exactly what on the instructions of the president? And is the president out of touch with the true state of this nation? That's the verdict of the NDC, led by its chairman, Johnson Esiedu Nketia. We're right back to deal with the vexed matters. I'm Samson, Lardy, Anyenini. Welcome. And here is Samson's take. Ashaiman, State-Sponsored Terrorism Against Rule of Law, Part 2. And I'm going to continue on this until right is done. There have been praises by some for what we did in Ashaiman. Please do not expect us to follow the Constitution when we undertake these exercises. Who is talking and about what exercise? Fellow Ghanaians, that is none other but a Director General in the Ghana Armed Forces. That is Brigadier General Eric Agri-Kwashi, reporting how proud they feel to have besieged Ashaiman. Recently, fully armed, using helicopters and armored cars, and terrorizing innocent people in the name of searching for suspects of the gruesome killing of a young trooper, Imoro Sharif, on March 4, 2023. Yes, He's proudly talking about how they acted lawlessly and treated fellow humans like animals in a democratic Ghana. Democratic Ghana. They stopped people from moving out of their homes. They broke doors and woke people up from their sleep. They blocked roads, lined people up, made them swim in rainy water mud while using various dangerous weapons to inflict injuries on their bodies. Yes, they seemed to celebrate the suffering and bloodletting they saw and took or allowed these footages to be taken and shared publicly. They, with such impunity, engage in the most egregious violations of the Constitution, the laws of Ghana, and all known international laws, conventions, and instruments against their conduct. It is not surprising that by the police's official account, this invasion was sanctioned even when the army had knowledge of the police's lawful and professional pursuit of the suspects of the dastardly act to face justice. So, while the police picked up 6 of the suspects of a robbery incident during which the soldier was stabbed, the army tortured an entire community and took as many as 184 supposed suspects into custody, only to release them later. When citizens demanded explanations for their unconstitutional and illegal conduct, they issued a statement insulting the intelligence of over 30 million Ghanaians and making such a big mockery of themselves. They called it an intelligence-led operation. What superior intelligence to keep a nation safe from terrorism? Well, Brigadier General Agriquashi is not alone. Even ministers, blind party loyalists, and some who refuse to think, justify and praise the wrong for as long as it does not affect them or their relations. Of course, they can't think beyond their stomachs to see the danger in entertaining such terrorism against the rule of law and due process. Remember that our leaders, including the president, have said and continue to repeat that we need this civilian rule and not any other form of government. All 184 people they arrested and detained without due process were released without an apology. Now, it is not the state, but the man standing trial for staging a coup on Facebook, Oliver Barker-Vormawors Fix the Country, that has mobilized lawyers and volunteers to visit with this fresh batch of victims of military brutalities to properly document their ordeal and assist them seek justice. Is this the same Ghana Army that gets all the plaudits for outstanding professional conduct on peacekeeping missions abroad? Once again, I join citizens with conscience who look into the future and do not want any other form of governance but a civilian democracy. I'm talking about gentlemen like Kweku Ntwibwe-Siako, Professors Kwejo Appiah-Tua and Stephen Kweku Azar, and groups like CDD Ghana and Occupy Ghana to demand investigations and sanctions for those behind these violations and their supervisors. The victims must be adequately compensated. Dear champion of rule of law and due process, reputable human rights lawyer and now president of Democratic, not Military Republic, and Commander-in-Chief of the Ghana Armed Forces. Dear sir, your silence is such loud complicity, George Floyd would be asking to know if it is not better to fight for justice for the living than the dead. And that is my take. We'll be right back to deal with the vexed matters. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. And is brought to you by the kindest sponsorship of Bank of Africa, strongest group and closest partner. A partner, MTN, everywhere you go. Ashesi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 31 years. My Way Insurance. Dial *165# on the MTN to join. Duroplast, how you get your water matters. Remember, where Duroplast goes, water flows. DBS Industries, roofing Papa Fie. Rehoboth Social Housing, your housing dreams become reality. Well, the whole of the day yesterday and almost all of the night, the nation was put through a process in Parliament. So in the end, you ask yourself, was it worth it? What was all of that noise about? Kweku Asante is Joy FM's parliamentary correspondent. He begins the discussion with me. But we also have distinguished Ghanaian statesmen, individuals who are going to help us for this discussion. We have on Zoom Professor Bafo Ajimandria. You know, that is a governance expert par excellence. Professor Kwejo Apieje Echia, lecturer, Faculty of Law, University of Ghana. You know him, he says it as it is. Now, Kweku, thank you. Sorry we woke you up too early because you had to go to bed sometime after 1, 2, isn't it?
Exactly, Samson. So yesterday, Parliament adjourned sitting past almost midnight because it had to do with two contentious businesses. The first having to do with 6 of President Akufo-Addo's ministerial nominees, and the second having to do with some 2 outstanding judges who the president nominated in July of last year, but it's taking almost a year for them to get their approval because of some political gridlock in Parliament. So, Samson, let's start from the ministerial nominees. It had taken the whole day. The minority had insisted, and even the National Democratic Congress, the mother party, had put out a statement whipping all its MPs in line, asking them to vote against 6 of President Akufo-Addo's ministerial nominees who were set to replace some ministers who had resigned to focus on their presidential ambitions and others who were being promoted to substantive ministers of state in certain substantive ministries. So that vetting had taken place several weeks ago, but because there were no consensus between both sides in terms of what to do with these nominees, the vote had not taken place. But given that Parliament is just set to go on Easter break next week, the majority side know that these are crucial businesses that they have to take before they go on break to return in May. And so next week, some more business will come, the one having to do with the 3 new tax measures, as well as the one on the Electoral Commission's CI. So it was on Thursday that this decision was expected to take. There was no agreement. The debate on the motion was actually concluded, but the vote could not happen because both sides were still haggling over the issues. That also went deep into the night, around 9 p.m., before the Speaker of Parliament said he was really tired, he could not continue sitting, and to adjourn sitting to the next day. When they came today, it was expected to be a numbers game because the minority had tried to get some compromise with the majority side and had failed. Indeed, the Thursday, they had gone into what is called a joint caucus meeting to try and get some arrangement to see if they can move this forward. And one of the key proposals that were put forth was that the majority were willing to sign an undertaking that they are going to back the NDC on their opposition to the Electoral Commission CI, which will make the Ghana card the sole identity document to register as a voter. Invariably, that arrangement fell through because the minority insisted that an undertaking was not enough, and they wanted a CI laid in the house, and then if they could make some compromises on their positions on the taxes, the ministerial nominees, and President Kufuor's nominations to the Supreme Court, they would do so. So that agreement fell through. The next day, we had to just vote. For about 2 hours, MPs were arguing, literally at each other's necks, as to how to position the ballot boxes. So the vote that was expected to happen just few hours after noon, it didn't happen until about 4:30 because both sides did not agree on how to even position the ballot boxes and whether or not MPs can do something as showing their votes to their leaders when they cast their vote. So the speaker had to take the leaders out of the house, suspended sitting for more than an hour to get some agreement as to how to position the ballots. Eventually, they came to some simple agreement, and the voting process started. It was a torturous process that was expected to have 275 MPs vote on the process. Eventually, only 272 voted. 3 did not. The 3 are NPP MP for Dom Kwabinya Sarah Joasafo, who was absent on the day, and also NPP MP for Kumewu, Honorable Philip Basua, who was also absent on the day. The interesting thing is that only the previous night he was available in full health and strength on the floor of the House, expecting that the vote to happen. Eventually, when it didn't, the expectation was that he'll be there the next day. He wasn't. And the information that we have picked reliably is that he has been struck with some ailment that it was not possible to come to Parliament that day. And so this was someone who was there the previous night but couldn't be there.
In fact, the majority leader had tried to hold things so that they would delay for him to come. But that didn't work until he got to a point and said he had information that he was not able to come, so they could go ahead with the vote, right?
Indeed, exactly. It was expected to be what happened with the Honorable Kojokum when the e-levy discussions were being had. He was not feeling so well, but he was wheeled in an ambulance, waiting to cast his vote on that controversial matter. That expectation was hard, but it was said that the situation the Honorable Member of Parliament was in did not allow for that arrangement to happen. So that is having to do with Honorable Philip Basua. The last person who could not take part in this process was the Honorable Member of Parliament for Asin North, Joe Quayson, who is an NDC MP, but having been injuncted by the Supreme Court from performing his responsibilities. So 273 MPs voted without
and Joe Jechi Quayson too. I thought we understood that the Supreme Court's decision to injunct him, and there was a certain, assurance that the case will be dealt with speedily, expeditiously, so that his fate will be determined whether he should come to Parliament or he should not. So why are we, how many months since the injunction? His people are not represented in the August House.
Indeed, around February, March, when the e-levy was passed, it was just around that time that the Supreme Court injuncted him. It's been a year now, and that case has barely traveled in the court. Indeed, his lawyers and the former chief whip on the minority side, Muntaka Mubarak, had complained to me that it appeared that the Supreme Court was only interested in injuncting the MP from performing his duties, and then they've stopped hearing the case. They've complained that there are certain motions that they've filed in court. There are certain processes that must travel, which the court has just failed or neglected to take. And so that is his case. He came to Parliament the previous day. He did not go into the chamber. He was sitting there with Johnson and Sedim Ketia in the press gallery and in the public gallery, just like anybody else, overlooking the process. Well, and so eventually the vote.
If he attempted, he would have been in contempt, and perhaps they would throw him into jail. So exactly. let's proceed. And the voting came, and gross, you had as many as 31 NDC MPs breaking rank votes, as in votes for the NPP or for government's business, as in the nominees. And in actual fact, averaging 20 MPs voting in favor of these nominations. What was the reaction? Samson. What was the reaction in Parliament?
Right. The fear of many came true because some of these NDC MPs, despite the party having whipped them all in line, with the national chairman himself coming to sit in the public gallery, overlooking them and asking them to do what exactly the party had decided. The numbers you put forth and the numbers we see on our screen is what happened. more than 20 averaging votes with these NPP MPs, some of whom have been elevated to ministerial nominees. And it has been a cacophony of noise in Parliament since then, with MPs accusing each other of treachery. Since then, we've seen a number of MPs already going on social media and posting that what happened was simply nothing but treachery, and that some of their colleagues, despite the party asking them to do A, have decided to do B. We've seen Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa already going on Parliament and already going on social media and posting in what many have said is related to the voting, saying that what happened is like the stab of treacherous people. We've also seen similar posts from MP for Medina, Francis Xavier Susu. We know that the party knew that something like this could happen because the last time there was a secret vote on ministerial nominees, Kojo Nkrumah, Hawa Kumsin, and co, some NDC MPs similarly broke ranks.
All right.
And so understanding was that, and Fifi Kumsin had told Evans Mensah on PM Express that they had put in a mechanism to ensure that these votes go the same way they had projected.
Right, and you are referring to Fifi Kwete.
The directive was that all MPs, if they go into the booth, because we are not allowed to show their vote to their whips, they should take pictures and videos when they go into the booth and come and show it afterwards. Indeed, some of MPs have done that, and I've seen plenty social media posts, people going on.
But the speaker warned that he will invalidate votes if the privacy rules were breached in the voting process.
Exactly. The speaker did warn about that. But still, some MPs still went into the booth and took videos of the process, to prove that they were not part of the treacherous groups. So that was the first vote. More than 20 MPs breaking ranks with their party and voting with them. And then the second vote happened with the two justices of the court.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kweku Asante. He is Joy News' parliamentary correspondent. And you've seen that we have shown you the figures on our platform, on our screens, how it went. For the benefit of those of you who are listening to us by radio, and if you are just waking up to the news, KT Hammond for Trade and Industry, he got 154 votes. Remember, the total number of MPP MPs in the House was 136. Just the same as the NDC also had. 19 abstentions were recorded. There was one abstention recorded and one rejected ballot. 116 voted against his approval. That's from the NDC side. We suspect that is what it is. Brian Echampong for Food and Agriculture, he had 167 votes. 98 voted against him. There were 4 abstentions and 3 rejected ballots. Mohammed Amin Adam, Minister of State at the Finance Ministry, he had 152 votes. 117 voted against him, 1 abstention, 2 rejections. Osei-Bonsu Amwa, Minister of State at the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development, he had 149 votes. 120 voted against him. There were 3 abstentions. Dr. Stephen Amwa, Deputy Minister for Trade and Industry, 146 votes, 123 votes against him, and then 3 abstentions. And then Stephen Asamoah Boateng, Minister for Religious and Chieftaincy Affairs, 147 votes, 122 against him, and then there were 3 abstentions for him as well. For the justices to the Supreme Court, George Kingsley Kumsin, he had 139 votes, and then 133 against him. There were no rejected ballots, there were no abstentions, and then Justice Jehu Yao, Ernest Yao Jehu, had 138 votes and 134 against him. There were no spoiled ballots and there were no abstentions. Now, let's speak to our guests. And Felix Ofosu Kwache joins me in the studio. Thank you very much for making time to join us. But as I announced to you already, we have Felix Kwache Ofosu. I should be the last to make that error. Yes, because we started all the way from KNUST when he was a student leader. Yeah. And I used to have a show that I hosted them on. Now, Professor Bafo Ajimandria and Professor Kwejo Apieje-Etua, let me begin with you. First, what are your thoughts about what happened? The NDC, as a party, had issued a statement publicly and asking its members to vote en bloc against the ministerial nominees. And the principle that they said they stood for was that there have been cries all across the country, but the president has not been listening, that it's enough. He can work with the ministers he has already. He doesn't need to replace those who have resigned. He doesn't need to add on and so on. Yet, what happened, happened. What are your thoughts, Professor Bafo Ajimandria?
Well, thank you, and again, thank you for having me. We have been watching this for some time at the Parliament, and personally, I wasn't surprised at the outcome, because normally, in such circumstances, you are going to find out that the wheeling and dealing on the floor of Parliament, on both sides and across barriers, eventually will determine the outcome. The outcome doesn't surprise me. I knew that the government side will win.
How did you know that? How did you know that? Because the majority were very hesitant to have a vote. And yes, at all times, it became obvious that because they knew they didn't have the numbers, it was dangerous to allow a voting process to go through. And so, as we understand, they actually tried to make some trade-offs. You know, the CIA matter, we are hearing what they sought to do with the minority, and all of that didn't seem to work.
And that's exactly what so-called democratic governance means. You are practicing democracy. You wheel and deal. You trade off things. It happens in all democracies, unfortunately. And you see, this particular issue, Samson, raises some fundamental questions about the relevance of democratic practice in certain societies. It's an issue that somehow we all shying away from dealing with. Look, the structure of our politics, democratic politics, is such that we have invested so much power in the executive. Whoever wins the executive is given literally every power within our political framework. And with that power, you are capable of influencing those who may even go against you. So if you follow closely, when the majority side decided to suspend the voting, they knew what was happening, and they knew that if they delayed the process, they are going to be able to get some other guys from the other side to join them. And this is what you should expect, you know. So for me, the outcome doesn't surprise me. I knew the majority side would have his way.
But how do you take this? How do you take this? That the suggestion that they were ready to trade off the principle that there was a bloated government and they didn't want any more. And yet they were ready to trade that off for the CI to not pass.
So you see, it tells you how principled our politicians are. Very principled, isn't it? So, look, and this could happen on either side, whoever is in power and whoever is in opposition. That's why I keep saying I wasn't surprised. Because you see, what we are having in our country, first of all, the extreme partisanship that has developed over time in itself is a problem. Secondly, the excessive powers that the Constitution gives the president to govern the country is also an issue that we need to make. These two parties know, and fortunately, both sides have been in power almost on equal terms in terms of duration, and they know what it is to govern this country with the kind of constitution that we have. So personally, when I hear any of the politicians talking about opposing this or that, for instance, when the minority side issued, the NDC issued a statement publicly, literally directing its members in parliament on how to behave, that in itself was a bit of a surprise, because you don't expect any outside agent to directly seek to influence decisions of the representatives of the people in parliament. But in our system, I think that seems to be allowed. So it happens all the time, okay? So I think if we are serious about curbing these kinds of things, then we need to go back to our constitutional framework, the kinds of structures that we have created to make certain important decisions of state. And for me, so far as we maintain this system, I'm not confident that any government in power in Ghana is going to behave differently. And that, for me, is a major concern.
But what do you say to this in a minute? Is it not a quality that is expected? Independence of thought and action, as far as an MP is concerned. That's what we want. So if the party issues a whip and says, all of you, stop thinking. We have done the thinking for you. Go and vote no. And there are some, if genuinely this is how they exercise their vote, because as we already know, there's allegations flying all over the place about some MPs who know that their seats are not safe. There are some who are poor, don't have money. They are going into the elections and are easily compromised in this process and so on. Isn't it a good quality if the decision, what influenced what happened, was that you don't decide for me. I represent my people. I must exercise my mind independently.
That is exactly the expectation we have of our parliamentarians. But unfortunately, that is not the reality of what happens in parliament. Because as you recounted your own points, there are so many other influences that come upon parliamentarians, influencing the final decisions that they may make on certain issues. So in this case, for instance, you are recounting the fact that heading towards elections, they may need some money. So if the other side offers some money, maybe probably they will take it and their conscience will be, discarded. So this aspect of democracy is a problem across board. How we address it, for me, should be perhaps the focus of future discussions, because otherwise this will be what we'll be dealing with indefinitely so far as we maintain this system. Conscience and principles are not something that politicians are well known for across democracies in the world.
Professor Kujaa Piejetua, what it's being said, even within the NPP already, is that there's a divided NDC. They are not united. And that's a sign that for those who think that breaking the eighth is not possible, if they can win against them, embarrass them in parliament, they will do a similar thing in the general elections.
Well, thanks for having me. And I think what happened yesterday was a disappointment for democracy in Ghana from two fronts. The fact that there was that brouhaha and all the shenanigans that went on. And two, the outcome. I think that the outcome reflects poorly on Ghana's expectation of the majority of Ghanaians. I suppose, looking at the fact that the ministerial issues were tied to the need for government to be less reckless in the use of scarce national resources at the point when we are going to the IMF and we need to put our house in order. And so, as a way of saying that government needs to also bear part of the burden and not just shift everything on the citizenry by trying to do the haircuts and suspend payment of the pension and so on. It was a way for government to also bear part of the burden. And the general expectation of the citizenry was that Ghana, the minority, will stand up on the side of the people, as they have touted since the IMF issue, for example, came up, that really they will show leadership in this respect and let Ghanaians show that they are really on their side. But the results indicate otherwise, and it's in that respect, it's very unfortunate. Having said that, whether the NDC is united or not, it's at the end of the day, as Prof has said, it comes down to what the individual MP wants to do to remain in power. And you cannot easily dismiss some of the allegations and theories flying around that possibly some money may have changed hands so that it will enable these MPs to retain power or win their primaries and come back to parliament. And so at this point, it looks like it's a question of what is important for the individual MP to be able to sustain himself politically and without looking at the larger national interest. And for that matter, it's one of the problems, as it's been said, that
they are MPs. They are MPs, yeah, including Rickett Hagan, who says this is an embarrassment that they have caused themselves. Should they see it that way, as an embarrassment? Some say why. Some say the change in leadership of the NDC in Parliament, which came with its own problems because of the lack of consensus, is partly to blame, and that this leadership too is not as strong as the Haruna-led leadership. But some say why. Even Chairman Sabonsu, a colossus like him, couldn't win a speaker, vote for the NPP. So what are you talking about? Why should they see this as an embarrassment?
Well, I'm not sure it comes down to the new leadership, or we can blame the new leadership for that. Because the NDC gurus were in Parliament, the chairman and all those people. So if the party had made a decision that this is the line you should toe and they don't toe it, then if any blame at all should be laid on the leadership, it should start from the national chairman right down to members of Parliament who are in leadership positions in Parliament. But I think that at the end of the day, it comes down to individual choices. And it's a question of how the MPs can look at the bigger picture, not just their personal interests or even the interests of the party, but the interests of the country as a whole. I think that they made a good point about the fact that there are some positions that can be aligned, or there are some positions that can be cut and some money saved in order to help even strengthen the governance system in the country and also save some money for the country. So these are the issues that I think should have influenced the outcome of the vote, but unfortunately it didn't go that way. And I think Ghanaians will be disappointed in the NDC for not sticking out for them in this time of need.
Right. In a minute, what do you say about the parties appearing to want to dictate what must happen in Parliament, as in the leadership of the party? So when it has to do with Ken must go, you have a group of MPP MPs, over 70% of the entire MPP group come out to say that we don't need him and we want to remove him. The party issues a letter and says, no, you can't do this. This must go on. They lose it. They are unable to proceed with it. It's becoming a trend where parties will issue, letters and directives. Now the NDC also doing the same, issuing directives to the MPs there. Is it good or bad for the democratic practice that the Parliament leadership is not giving a free hand to operate?
Yeah, it's a good point, but in all democracies, in all political party systems, we have a situation where the party has an agenda and they want membership to toe that line. They also, and therefore, for that matter, that's why we have the whip system in Parliament, so that the whip can ensure that the decision taken at caucus is what is reflected in their votes and the decisions they make in Parliament. But there are situations at times where they are allowed to vote according to their conscience. And that is where they allow that free vote to follow. And to determine if this is a good policy or not, I think it depends on the issue at stake. I think they have to read the mood of the country or the people and realize that this is what the people need in Parliament. And therefore, it is important that individual interests do not sidestep the realization of that goal for the larger good of the society.
Right. Let's hear from the... Yeah. Please complete your...
They toe the line. I think that is fair. It's all part of the democratic process.
All right.
But there are situations where it is just in the interest of the party. And therefore, in that situation, I don't agree with the decision to be forced or compelled to vote in one way or the other.
All right. Thank you very much. And so, Prof. Piagetua and Bafo, I will plead with you to listen to these two politicians, and then I'll take your brief final thoughts, including whether you think if this was the general feeling in the country that somebody has to be punished when it comes to the electorate voting for their MPs, as was said in the Ken Must Go crusade. Yes, Felix, what's the conversation like within the NDC? Rickett Hagan says he's very sad. He hasn't slept all night. Many of your members appear to be saying the same thing. What happened? Fifi Kwete had promised the world that there was a system to ensure that everybody, complied with the whip.
Well, I mean, those who express disappointment have every cause to do so. But let me begin by placing it on record that the leadership and general membership of the NDC remains implacably opposed to the obnoxious policies of this unhinged, reckless, and in some instances, utterly useless government that has become an albatross around our neck. And many of the things that this government has done has met with the disapproval of large sections of the Ghanaian population.
And they depend on you. If they depend on you and you fail them, what's the point?
I'm about to make the point. First of all, the Ghanaian people too have a responsibility to watch who they elect into office. You see, you cannot go and elect a useless government and shift the burden on policing them on another party.
There's a reason there's opposition.
Yes, but there's a reason why you also have the opportunity to vote. Nobody can tell me that there wasn't sufficient reason to give pause to the electorate not to elect President Akufo-Addo. People like myself, for the better part of a decade, have railed against him and spoken about the fact that he is going to do exactly what he is doing in power. Some people labeled us babies with sharp teeth, vilified us, and called us all sorts of names, and somehow went to elect him. Today, he is living the worst governance ever seen under the Fourth Republic, if not in our entire history. So the electorate too must take their share of the burden. That when you see that a leader is wrong and cannot govern, you don't go and elect him.
The electorate must be commended that last night you had equal numbers.
I'll make the point.
And you failed as an opposition.
Something, I'll make the point.
If you think that the pulse of the nation was to vote against this.
I'll make the point. But you see, the pulse of the nation should have been to reject Akufo-Addo at the polls, especially after what he did between 2016 and 2020. If that had been done, we would not be having this conversation. You see, what President Akufo-Addo has done is blue murder. He has destroyed our country. When it comes to our economy, we are a laughing stock. He has reduced us in the eyes of well-meaning people around the world.
We'll talk about the economy. For now, we are talking about the failure of the opposition in Parliament.
But what is even more shocking is that after destroying the economy, he decides that he will do absolutely nothing to stop what caused the destruction. One of them is an exceptionally bloated government that is not efficient and that in many respects we could have done without. Now, I agree entirely that with the numbers that we have in Parliament as a party, we have the capacity, at the very least, to put spokes in the wheels of this government when it decides to misrule and misgovern in the manner that they are doing. That is why the national leadership of the NDC and various sections of the party made the effort to engage our parliamentarians. You see, people speak as though the leadership of the party sat at our Adabaka office and issued the fiat. I am aware of engagements with the MPs by leading lights in our party to impress upon them the need to toe this line. You see, the MPs do not even need that sort of engagement to come to the realization that what President Akufo-Addo is doing in terms of the size of his government is untenable, and that we cannot have a situation where, in the midst of the suffering that we are going through, his own inability to pay old men.
I'm hearing excuses from you.
No, I'm not.
That I think that those listening should not take.
There's no excuse. No.
Because
but why are you making excuses?
If you have equal numbers, if you have equal numbers last night,
but you have not made me.
And you cannot cannot do the work of the opposition. And the president is still capable of doing everything except change a man into a woman. Then you are useless opposition.
Samson. It is the president and his government who are useless. They are the ones who have plunged us into this gap. I don't know of any jurisdiction in the world where the opposition is held accountable for the uselessness of a government. You see, and don't encourage that narrative. The government must take responsibility for the terrible things they are doing. I am making the point that yes, we in the opposition have capacity at the very least to put spokes in the wheels of government so they don't do the things they are doing. The leadership of the NDC took steps to ensure that. Apart from the leadership of the NDC, there are very prominent figures within the party that also took steps to ensure that that is done. I am saying that the MPs themselves, even without prompting or prodding, should have been aware that the right thing to do was to vote against these ministerial nominees. Not because there was anything wrong with the personnel, the specific individuals, but because it was the only way to create a stalemate that will compel President Akufo-Addo to climb down from his ivory tower and stop the useless governance. Unfortunately, there appears to be a handful of MPs who believe that it is right to aid the destruction of our country. And so for varied reasons, they decided that in spite of the clear common sense position that they should have taken, they will go and assist President Akufo-Addo to get away with the blue medal. Indeed, this morning, there have been all manner of things said. Some have claimed, I do not have proof of it, that there was monetary inducement. Others have described it as a revolt against the new leadership, or if you like, a protest against the way that the leadership changes were effected. Others too have said that they did not like the fact that there was some, if you like, directive from the party. Samson, none of these three excuses is tenable. Because at the very least, the constituents who put the MPs in power or put them in parliament expect that they will be represented. And you and I know, without even any scientific research, at least if the commentary that has been done publicly by various sections of our people is anything to go by, you know that people are very, very much opposed to the way that this government is bloated. And therefore expected that the MPs would act in a manner that was consistent with their aspirations and expectations if President Akufo-Addo would not do what he has to do. But unfortunately, they were let down by a handful of our MPs. But if you check the pattern of voting, an overwhelming majority of our MPs voted against the ministerial nominees, which then suggests that the NDC as a corporate body, as an entity, cannot be said to support the misrule and misgovernance that is going on. It is the case that we have a few faith columnists who do not appear to understand that it is not in the interest of the country, and I'm not saying the NDC, because really this is not a case where the NDC is simply deciding to do politics by frustrating government on a legitimate exercise. This is an instance where the NDC is aligning with the general sentiment of the Ghanaian people. But a few people let us down. Again, the nature of the voting.
If it is actually the case.
But that is the case.
That the so-called majority was trading with the NDC, the CI that you are so vehemently opposed, and on the back of that, you were willing to support them. Where is the principle?
First of all, I'm not aware of any so-called trading that has gone on anyway. Anybody with evidence of this can put it forward. In any event, are we not told that the EC is an independent body? So if the EC is independent, what trading is the EC interested in?
No, the thing is now in Parliament. It is Parliament that will determine whether there will
Parliament
be...
cannot touch the EC.
It is only Parliament. That Parliament can.
But the CI cannot be amended by Parliament, can it?
It cannot be, can be rejected.
Yes.
So Parliament has the power.
The point I'm making is that I'm not aware of any trading that is going on in respect of a CI. What I do know is that the people of Ghana do not want President Akufo-Addo to continue with the useless governance. So they expect that having voted for him and having regard to the fact that he does not respect them, does not think that he has to govern properly, and does not even realize that in the midst of crisis, you must do what is right to get it out of them.
It must be good reason that the people of Ghana gave you a hung parliament.
No, but as for the point,
gave you a speaker of parliament, so to speak.
No, the speaker of parliament was elected by MPs.
I hear you.
Indeed, MP people to contributed to it. But the point I'm making is that as for that excuse that you seek to make for President Akufo-Addo, that he is to be absolved of blame, and that the NDC should be blamed. It is not tenable. It's not something I'm going to ever agree with.
Nobody has said that. I'm only saying that the opposition also has a duty.
Absolutely. But the bigger duty lies
you cannot say, right, thank you.
The opposition did not come to the number of ministers
President
Akufo-Addo had. We cannot bear responsibility for it. But of course, we can contribute towards stopping him.
Okay.
There has been a failure yesterday. But I'm saying that it does not represent the position of the NDC as an opposition.
Okay.
So we need to isolate the faith columnists who did this. And that is exactly
so what will happen? What will happen?
Well, the way that the voting goes, it is difficult to determine who did what. But if there's any opportunity to determine who did what and sanction it, I'm sure that the party will take it. And indeed, the sort of backlash that they themselves will receive from their constituents will be sufficient basis for them to refrain from this going forward.
Thank you. Richard, so, and I asked that question earlier, if the NPP knew beforehand that it could win some NDC people to its side, why did it have to go through all of this, delay the process, until we had to go through all of this marathon, 12 hours?
Well, thank you, Samson, and good morning to Felix. So I think parliamentary democracy is messy. Democracy itself is messy. Ours is a very difficult one, especially from what you said. We have a hung parliament. If you believe that, parties would hold on to their principles and ensure that they advance or exercise their oversight responsibility in ways that inure to the benefit of the country. If you make that assumption, then I am looking differently at the outcome of that election to approve the ministers yesterday differently from what Felix is saying. I think Felix is angry about the outcome, but it shouldn't be. Democracy in its fullness was manifested yesterday where people, in my view, voted their conscience. Now, the NDC and Felix can think that, it's a betrayal, but is it also the case that the people thought that it was wrong? That in spite of all the interventions and the proposals government is made to cut expenditure, which is carried most of it in the budget before Parliament, to say we are doing this and that to cut expenditure. Then the one fixation of the NDC, which for me is political, it is patronizing to the people of Ghana to say that we want you to cut the size of government, else you are not doing anything to control expenditure. It's not just not true. The debate in Parliament you heard, they were saying to you that, look, these MPs, they earn their salary as MPs. When they go, and the vast majority of President Akufo-Addo's appointees are on their parliamentary salaries. So it's inherently, you have, it is one time where the provisions of Article 78 make sense to me, to say that majority of the ministers must come from Parliament. So therefore, you have a number of people who already are earning their salary.
Are you saying that MPs who are ministers are not better off in conditions of service than MPs who are not ministers?
Relatively, because you heard from them that they themselves saying that we're already making our living with our parliamentary income, right? So,
but that's not correct.
But that they chose to do that, which is also a way of saving the state, right? So the government is made a litany of proposals.
No, when I say that's not correct, I'm saying factually, is that the situation? In reality, there are conditions that are attached to being a minister, and they are enjoying all these conditions. Right. And the salaries too, is it true that they are taking only MP salary without more?
Yes, I've heard ministers, I think the Labour minister, spoke to that following some interactions to say that that's what he's chosen to do. And a number of them have
That's
spoken.
what he has
chosen to do. And I'm saying that across the board, most of them are doing that. But you see, what is of substance, Samson, is that there are rafts of revenue control measures that government has introduced. But the NDC somehow carries on this disinformation to say that the country wants the size of government cut from the first term to now. you will agree with me that the size of government tremendously has been reduced. This is the one time in our history where you don't have deputy regional ministers. For the first time, you have that. So there's significant concessions made in that direction. But you see, we shouldn't overlook the fact that there's a mandate given the president. He needs a team to do it. Samson, you are seated here. You have a producer and assistant producer, and below that are people. You need a full complement of that team to support you on air to make sure this thing is running the way it ought to be. If anybody comes to say that, okay, well, we are cutting our budget here at multimedia, and so therefore you are entitled to only one producer, perhaps you can make do, but it will make your work difficult. If you don't deliver, you cannot go back and say because you cut the budget, they will just tell you, deal with what we have given you. But see, the business of running a state is almost like flying a plane. You don't want to make a mistake up there in the air. When you make mistakes by that, people die by the time you get to explain yourself. And
people
you will not be available.
People asked what the result was
Yeah.
for 126 ministers. People have asked that question.
Oh, yes, and I think that's something we can interrogate. But if you look at elections being a measure of performance, then in 2020, the verdict is clear that people were satisfied with the production of the government in the first term. And we can compare, and you said we're going to talk about the economy. So we'll look at the numbers. You see, there's this disinformation by the NDC, which I think that today, if you give us time, we will explore to see that they are just interested in creating a certain impression in the minds of people, factual or not, to say that we want people to say that cut the size of government. But that is not the only thing. There are a lot of things that government is doing. So the outcome of yesterday's vote, I see it to be a victory for democracy. If I were the NDC, I don't think that they would want to go.
So this is a clear sign to you that the three financial bills that the government is, which is also some precondition for the IMF bailout. And we are told that in total, collectively, they are supposed to give us 4 billion?
4 billion or so, yeah.
Annually,
yeah,
to sort of get this economy back. It's a done deal. Your numbers will make sure it happens. When it comes to the CI, the controversial CI, that one too, it will happen.
yeah.
If the NDC is saying anything, we should just, as it were, brand them as simply making noise outside.
No, I wouldn't say so. I'm saying that there are NDC people. Of course, whipping, in Parliament is a real thing. It's part of parliamentary processes. But I'm saying that to a very large extent, you will see a coming together of people who understand that we have a stake in the running of the state to say, if there's a responsibility we have to ensure that governance carries on, as Parliament, we must do our bit. Yes, they can choose to say we're not going to vote for it, but it will come again. It will come again. At a certain point, you have to think about it and say, well, what is my interest? Is it for my party to look good or for my country to look good? And that's where the break would happen. Yes. I think that if you look at what the NDC, they are crying about this morning, that our people went and joined and all of that, you can decide not to approve them on one count, but the vote will come again. And at some point, you'll be seen as the person obstructing. Because what I saw yesterday was people saying that, look, enough. You have a president who has the mandate, and he is doing what he must do. You disagree with it, that's fine. But you don't tie his hand behind his back and say that you will not give him the team that he needs to be able to do the work that he's brought to do. So please, it wasn't a bad day for democracy. I heard Dr. Tiahini earlier who was talking about a sad day for democracy. It's not. I'm beginning to cringe when I hear people, because people voted their conscience, they're trying to make it appear as if, the NDC must vote against them in order to have that, we have a functioning democracy. It's not true.
Thank you.
I think we should desist from that conversation.
So, Professor Bafo Ajumendia and Professor Kojo Appiah-Tuah, I am back to you on what I sought to ask you earlier. Do you feel that the electorate may be thinking, contemplating losing, or they would lose some trust in the NDC as a formidable, viable opposition as it is, that should be giving, power to do anything different? When there was overwhelming cries in this country for Ken Ofori-Atta to be removed, people put their faith in Parliament that they will do so. The NDC said if they had just one support from, the majority, they would have made a success. What does this tell you? And do you think the NDC as a party will suffer any repercussions for this? Professor Bafwe Ajmandua first.
Well, I don't think so. Certainly, right now, there may be that kind of feeling by people who are very much alert to the issues that we are discussing. But so far, I am not familiar with any study that will indicate that because of a certain misbehavior, so to speak, in Parliament, therefore the electorate as a whole will be turned against that particular party. I don't think that is the case. I think that, first of all, this connects to what my friend Mr. Kwachi Ofosu said earlier, putting the blame on the electorate for what has happened by electing President Akufo-Addo. But the fact is that it's the politicians who present themselves to the electorate, and based on their presentation, the electorate makes the decision. That's number one. So, and of course, in addition to that, we have created structures that beyond elections, we also expect these structures to work. And one of them being the structure of political parties in Parliament. So the expectation of the opposition, therefore, is perhaps to carry on what perhaps the electorate will expect in terms of check and governance. But in this case, clearly, we find that that did not take place. If we assume that, in fact, overwhelming majority of the electorate expected these particular nominations to be defeated. There's no study confirming that. But I think the political...
President Mahama's comments are here. He says that just about 5 minutes ago, he says a couple of weeks ago, our NDC group in Parliament announced a principled position, not to approve any new ministers until the president has taken steps to significantly reduce the size of his government. This position was supported by a broad section of Ghanaians and public advocacy groups. I don't know a public advocacy group that was against this position.
Right.
Unfortunately, Ghanaians were sorely disappointed yesterday when several members of the minority, for some parochial and personal interests, voted against the principled position adopted by the party. I am also disappointed. Those responsible for this betrayal must do some serious and soul-searching and learn to place national interest above personal interest. Equally disappointing is the president's refusal to to seize the opportunity to realign and downsize his bloated government when the NPP flag-bearer hopefuls and the chieftaincy minister resigned. I still believe, as I said in Ho recently, clearly in this time of crisis, the excruciating hardship President Akufo-Addo and his MPP administration and some of our MPs are out of tune with the mood of the Ghanaian people. I still believe, as I said in Ho recently, that in this time of crisis, government can still run efficiently with not more than 60 ministers. Well, Professor Adai and others say government can run with 40. Some actually say less than 40. Then he concludes by saying, for our grassroots members and all Ghanaians who are disappointed by this insensitivity, I urge you not to despair. 2024 offers us an opportunity to work hard to defeat this reckless government that seeks to destroy our democracy and the very livelihoods of Ghanaians. An opportunity for us to work and build the Ghana we all want from January 7, 2025.
Wow, I think the former president has been very harsh on his people in Parliament. If you call your own people betrayal, I'm not sure how these people are going to be working directly with him. So I find that statement on his own people to be a little bit too harsh. I wish he had moderated his criticism of his own people in Parliament. Because as we've been talking today, ordinarily we will expect parliamentarians to vote according to their conscience. When the party decides to keep them in line, well, they have a job to do, but ultimately, it's these individuals who are going to decide. So if they decided against what the party's position has been, I think certainly we are disappointed, but I don't think it's an act of betrayal.
Okay.
Maybe they serve their confidence.
All right. Professor Apiejetua, what do you also say? Do you sense that, as you said earlier, that Ghanaians, the mass of Ghanaians who felt that this was a good position, are disappointed? Do you feel they may take it against the NDC? How do they feel when the NDC this morning, in a few minutes, we are going to the issue of the appointments to the EC? The NDC is crying hell that you shouldn't appoint your party people to the EC. But you are in Parliament where you have the opportunity with equal numbers to check some of these. At least there's a judge that you guys said previously he had contested elections on the ticket of the NPP. And for that reason, he should not be approved. And yet, he's approved. So how do you expect us to take you seriously?
Exactly the point. I think at this point, the Ghanaian populace will see the NDC as blowing hot and cold, because their flag bearer to be, or the hopeful, the former president, Mr. Mahama, seems to be building a certain level of manifesto, if you like, for the party, based on the weaknesses or some of the lapses that the NPP has displayed. And so to talk about, for example, a bloated government and a need to downsize the government is something that it is anticipated that the NDC will carry along if voted into power. And so for the MPs to vote against that line shows that, is it just a question of public relations gimmick that the president is manifesting? And that if the NDC is voted into power, isn't it going to maintain or keep the same line? And so that certainly will create a sort of confusion in the minds of the people. And in my sense, it may cause a distrust in the NDC, that we cannot trust you on what you are saying when you vote the other way around. Because whether you belong to the NDC or NPP is not the point. The point is that the people sees the opposition as a means to control government, a means to oversight government and ensure accountability. And so if at this point in time, these are one of the few opportunities available to show that power, and you blow it, then it creates that doubt in the minds of the people, whether to trust you or not.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Apiejetua. And we will take a quick break. When we return, we are going to the question of accusations that the president is tainting the neutrality or damaging the neutrality and independence of the Electoral Commission by the 3 appointments that have been made so far. We'll also share some of your views with you on this matter. Thank you. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as always, we put Ghana first. I've got some of your comments. We'll read them before we go to ask them and interrogate the question if indeed the president is seeking to blight the neutrality and independence of the Electoral Commission. He actually says that don't think about the managers of the commission, think about the voter and the vote. That's all there is. The managers can't do anything about it. Some disagree with that. My guest, Professor Bafo Ajimandria, Chief Executive Officer, the John A. Kufuor Foundation. That's John A. Kufuor Foundation. Professor Kwejo Apiejetua is Lecturer, Faculty of Law, University of Ghana. Richard Ahiagwa is Director of Communications of the NPP. Felix Kwachiofosu is former Deputy Communications Minister and aide to former President Mahama. Now, let's get to some of your messages that you have shared. This one says, Ghanaians decided that NDC was not good enough to manage Ghana and so decided to allow them to be a strong opposition. They are proving to be not good enough in opposition also. This is the strongest opposition Ghanaians have created and handed it to NDC, but they are disappointing here also. And that is from Kofi. Kwame Sapong says, Felix, you haven't started well. You can't blame the voter for what happened yesterday. Your party took a decision and couldn't keep it. That's the bottom line. You can't shift the goalpost. Leave the government out of this and look inward. That's from Kwame Siedu Sapong. Okay, so this one says, our parliament is now comparable to Uber or Okada. Pay and ride. What does this make of the ex-president's endorsement for unopposed flag bearership? More upset to come? That is a question. State capture is dear and present. Now, that was from Ni. And Jan Best says, as expected, when it comes to these things, the politicians have one motivation: themselves. Scratch my back or palm, let me scratch yours. Colin Stetter says, the pillars, that is leaders, to help fix the country are not helping because deep down you have people who want wealth without working, who have knowledge without character, and who want to go into politics without principle. Our only hope is God to intervene. Well, God intervenes through humans. Then Edward Beidu says, what hurts the NDC most is the hefty approval of Kobina Tahiru Muhammad. But hey, it's all in the interest of Ghana. Those spaces in governance cannot be left vacant for close to 2 years. Kweku Ewua says, the NDC MPs voting pattern was not a sabotage of the new leadership. It's rather a vindication that indeed some of them are compromised. That's how they have been voting since the start of this parliament. And it goes to affirm why the changes were necessary. It's good. It's a good omen. Obeng Boateng, I think Honorable Ato-Forsyth must answer. He should come out and explain to us why NDC MPs had the numbers, yet we lost and got the ministers approved. For Kofi, as much as we are disappointed with the NDC MPs for not rejecting extra cost, we should be worried about the many MPs, the few NDC MPs joined to vote yes. Well, that's their position. Luminal, MPs are on the tickets of their parties in parliament to pursue their collective party agenda on choices, policy decisions, and on public opinion at all times. Those MPs are there to do partisan politics because parliament is a house of politics. They can't be independent. Interesting points there. Says they can't be independent. I'll read just two more. This one, Frank Anderson says that NDC MPs have just told the whole world they are not to be trusted and have no credibility. They are part of Ghana's problems. Those individuals have no conscience and a disgrace to this generation. It makes a mockery of people's representation in parliament. From today until 2024 elections, they are better off remaining silent. They have no principle. Bunch of selfish, self-serving bandits? Oh, really? Okay. Thank you for your messages. Now, let's go to the question of the Electoral Commission and the new appointments that have been made into that commission. So, on that one, I'll begin with Felix. They will just listen to this, the president himself and I think that should be enough. Let's hear the president, and then I'll come back to the studio.
In emphasizing the importance and credibility of elections, it must be pointed out that the count, the collation, the declaration of results cannot and should not be more important than the sacred God-given right of a citizen casting his or her ballot. I have said it before and I will repeat it. Elections are about those who cast the vote, not those who count, not those who supervise, not those who transmit, and not those who declare. The heart of the democratic process is giving effect to the choices made by those who cast the vote. The three persons I have sworn in a few moments ago as members of the Electoral Commission are persons I am confident will bring integrity, professionalism, and independence and fairness of mind to the discharge of their duties.
Right, and the three persons, Dr. Peter Appiah-Hene, who is an assistant professor with over 10 years working experience in the computer science industry, and he is with he's the head of Department of Science and Informatics at the University of Energy and Natural Resources in Sunyani. There was, right after the elections, the potential ministers for that region came up, and there was this flyer that circulated, and he was one of those that was said to be in contention. And the flyer also described him as a patron of TESCON in that region. TESCON is the NPP's student wing. Since his name came up, people have brought up some footages, including radio discussions where he's vehemently speaking in favor and supporting government policy. Not just government policy, but speaking as though, he was speaking for a party or as a party communications person. The next person is Reverend Akua Ofori-Boateng. Reverend Akua Ofori-Boateng has not drawn so much attention. She's Director of Programs for the Anglican Diocese of Accra, a member of the United States Trade Advisory Committee on Africa. She served on the 2020 Eminent Advisory Committee of the Electoral Commission of Ghana. I know her beyond that because we are both fellows in the Africa Aspen group. I'll tell you a bit more about her beyond this. And then also we have Hajia Salima Ahmed Tijani. She's a banker with close to 2 decades experience. She's a senior remittance officer at the Agricultural Development Bank. She's a member of the Chartered Institute of Bankers and associate member of the Boardroom Institute. There's also a lot more to say about her as far as her affiliations are concerned that you may not have heard yet. There's a lot that's been dug up on her as well. So let's begin with you, Felix. Yeah. What exactly are your issues? The Constitution says once you have the competence and qualification of an MP, you can be an EC member. They are supposed to be chairperson, 2 deputies, and 4 other members. And that's exactly what has happened. And these are replacing 3 other people who I suppose would have retired.
Samson, I watched the insert you played, which the president made those comments about what he thinks the role of the EC is, or how elections should be determined, or the outcomes of elections should be determined. And once again, I come to the conclusion that his words ring hollow, as has been the case on many, many occasions. He simply does not mean what he says, and he doesn't say what he means. Because the occasion on which he made these comments was the very occasion where he has appointed this well-known MPP fanatic into the leadership of a body that is supposed to serve as a referee in elections that are conducted between the NDC and MPP and other political parties. There's a reason why the Electoral Commission of Ghana is mandated to be independent in our constitution. The reason is that the framers of the constitution do not want interference with their work in a manner that makes the playing field uneven and swings elections unfairly in favor of one participant or the other. That is the fundamental principle. So when the time comes for people to be appointed to the commission, and the president launches such a gratuitous attack on the independence of the commission by appointing somebody who is known, not just known to be a supporter or sympathizer of the party, but a member of the party, who I'm told has contested elections before on the ticket of the party, is a known communicator who has publicly gone to defend the positions of President Akufo-Addo and the party, and who has been patron of the students' wing of the MPP. It calls for condemnation. And you see, I do not understand why in this country there are sections of people who simply allow President Akufo-Addo to get away with the murder that he's engaged in. I'm talking about using it figuratively. So, Samson, tomorrow, if for any reason there's a vacancy at the Electoral Commission, and President Mahama is president, and he appoints me as Electoral Commissioner, is it going to sit well with the people of Ghana? All those people who have kept quiet and are watching on for this desecration of the independence of the Electoral Commission and other institutions, will it sit well with me, with them, if I, as rapidly NDC as I am, is appointed as a chairperson of the Electoral Commission, simply because President Mahama has the power to do so? There are some things that we cannot accept, and this represents a new low in the systematic effort to demolish the credibility and independence of state institutions and tie them to the apron string of President Akufo-Addo and his MPP, so that they will have absolute control and dominance over all strata of our society. This is what it is about. Already, the manner in which the old leadership of the commission was removed through frivolity, and I think it was frivolous. The charges leveled against them were laughable. The manner in which they were removed and replaced with people whose conduct at least has tended to create the impression that they have sympathies for the MPP was problematic enough. It generated huge uproar. And consistently, what they have done, the effort they have made to make it more difficult for people to vote in this country than what they have to do, has generated considerable disenchantment amongst the people of Ghana. So the last thing we expected was that President Akufo-Addo was going to put the icing on the cake by appointing an openly MPP person to be part of the commission. You see, we cannot accept this. What it simply means is that you cannot look forward that elections held in this country where President Akufo-Addo and the MPP have a stake will have the sort of fairness and balance that it should have. And that is the reason why you constantly see that there is tension between the EC and the NDC, for instance. They are simply not prepared to listen to anything the NDC says, because it appears that they have an objective. They think that their mandate really is to entrench President Akufo-Addo and his party in power at all costs, even if they have to undertake some of the most shocking and most bizarre operations, like this insistence on the Ghana card as the only means of registration, at a time when they know that it is not everybody who qualifies to vote who has that card, and it is not through the fault of those individuals that they do not have it. It does not make any bit of sense, but they will implement it because that is what President Akufo-Addo and his MPP want. Now, the president is going for broke and appointing hardcore MPP members. Look, we in the NDC will never sit down for elections to be skewed in favor of the MPP ab initio, even before the first ballot is cast. And if it is the intention of President Akufo-Addo to use these sort of things to give the MPP unfair advantage, then he is grossly mistaken. It doesn't matter what he does. Even if the elections are held in his bedroom, to the extent that his governance has been this poor, and they have destroyed our economy and every facet of our life as a people, and inflicted this sort of pain and hardship on us, the people of Ghana, I'm sure, will speak in a manner that will make it impossible for any sort of manipulation to change the verdict. So all that President Akufo-Addo and his MPP are setting us up for is more tension going up into elections. Because what is the point? There are many people. You see, you made a point about the gentleman's qualification. Samson, there are 1,001 Ghanaians who have even more better credentials than this man. So really, if it's just about credentials, there are many people you can find who are not tainted politically. who are not tainted politically, who can do this role. I do not remember any time in our history where state institutions were so blatantly and frontally politicized as we have had.
The question others have asked is, what do you guys want the president to do? He just come into office within a period where many people are retiring or leaving certain offices and he has to fill them. In the judiciary, you accuse him of packing the judiciary. But the thing is that every time he's making appointments to the judiciary or the Supreme Court or High Court or Court of Appeal, it is because, you know, they are replacing people who need to be replaced. In the NCC, also there has been appointments which were confirmed. He inaugurated together with, sworn in together with these people. So what is it? What should he do? For the EC, these three people are replacing Mrs. Hajia Sadatu Meida, Mr. Ebenezer Agrifin, and Mrs. Rebecca Kabuki Ajololo, who have all retired. You mentioned one person. When it comes to the woman, the only link from all the information that has been Salima, the only thing that has been used, sort of linked, she's been linked to, is the fact that the husband is Sheikh TB Bamba, who is a former MC, former MP, and Ghana's ambassador to Saudi Arabia until, is it 2020 or so, and that her sister is the current CEO of Maslock. What does that do? That the pointing to the fact that, is it her sister, not herself, who has indicated publicly that she was going to contest elections and so on and so forth. Can people be independent despite this? When it comes to Ekuya Ofori Boateng, the Reverend Minister, we have told you she has had opportunity with the Electoral Commission, the eminent panel. She is a member of the United States Trade Advisory Committee on Africa. She serves on as a board member on the board of the Otumfuo Osei Tutu II Foundation. She's a co-founder and executive director of Aquatus, a faith-based foundation, and she also is an author. She's the author of the book Broken for Use. She has done well for herself in terms of her academics. She's got an MBA from Indiana University in the USA. She's got a Master's of Arts degree in ministry from the Trinity Theological Seminary in Legon. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in engineering physics from the Miami University in the USA. The only thing people say is that, well, she preaches on a radio station owned by the cousin of the president. So what?
Nobody has mentioned the name of the Reverend Minister. I don't think so. In the case of the other lady, you have established a certain relationship, even if tenuous, which suggests that she has some level of political exposure. At least she's related to somebody who is known to the MPP. But you see, you can avoid that, because what that does is to deepen suspicion of an institution that already has acted in ways to engender that suspicion. Already, Jean Mensah and Bosman Asari are people that we have deep suspicions have sympathies towards the MPP, at least because of their previous conduct in their previous roles. Again, the manner in which they even came into office.
So if you fault Jean Mensah, who else will you not fault? Because Jean Mensah was running IEA,
yes, but even a
governance think tank that has contributed immensely to our democracy.
We have had running battles with the IEA. I'm sure you know. We don't have time for me to go through all the issues we have with the IEA, even in terms of their posturing on the political landscape. And these things are important. The Constitution does not require the EC to be independent for fun. So that requirement must be met. Can you, in all honesty, say that this Apia Hene guy meets the requirement of independence? How do you pluck an MPP person, non-MPP person, and go and put him on a commission and say that we should not comment?
Okay.
Given all that has happened with the EC and the way that they even behave, look at their posturing towards the NDC. You have the deputy or a commissioner of the EC who goes on radio and describes the NDC as the biggest threat to Ghana's democracy. That is a political statement. How are we in the NDC supposed to accept this? How do we accept that such a person can preside over free, fair, and transparent elections, given the history that we have had in the last few years? Then, to make matters worse, you go and make this sort of appointment, and you have spared no effort to highlight the credentials of the individuals. Granted that they are professionally qualified, but I have made the point already that you can find 1 million Ghanaians with such credentials who are not politically exposed or politically tainted. At the very least, you cannot trace their political support for any party.
Right.
But these people
so
simply do not mean independent. What it simply means, before I land up, just one before I have a comment, what it simply means is that nobody can guarantee that these people will act independent of President Akufo-Addo and his MPP. That is essentially what we are saying. And I've posed the question to you, Samson. What President Akufo-Addo has done simply means that if tomorrow President Mahama is president and he appoints me as electoral commissioner, Richard Hayagba should keep quiet and live with it. That is essentially what
interesting. Yes, Richard, what do you have to say? I allowed him sufficient time because they are raising the opposition a lot more. Even though they are civil society, we have heard from the CDDs, Abrampa, and a few others. Yes.
Well, Samson, I have listened to the conversation, and earlier on, I just know about the individual remotely. The fact that he has some affinity with the MPP, which is the basis for all of this. I think that, yes, when you're looking at the issue of maybe people being reasonably disassociated from political parties and all of that, you can make the point. I don't disagree with that. But what I find difficult is the seeming impression being created that our electoral system is so vulnerable, is so it's not as rigorous as it should be, such that the appointment of an individual on that board really just changes the game for NDC. It's not. Whilst I grant all of the other concerns, what is material, what is consequential for us to talk about is the health and the systems we have built. In this country, it was said, and I think that Phyllis agrees, that the winning of election in this country occurs at the polling station. And so that the processes are in place to make our electoral system even independent from those who manage it, such that you and I who have stake in the elections that are coming up or subsequent ones, we have what it takes to police the system, independent of the individuals who are there. And so I don't see where we then belabor the point and say because of that something uncharacteristic has happened.
But that position of the president is a debatable one, isn't it? And I just, immediately I heard it, I went to pick Mabel Akubanase's book, Pink Sheets. After the election petition, she wrote a book. And the CJ then, Georgina Wood, wrote a foreword. She empaneled the court to hear that petition. And the foreword, this is what she wrote. It's instructive. First, she's quoting Joseph Stalin. And he says, quote, "The people who cast the votes don't decide an election. The people who count the votes do." End quote. And she says, as I write this, I reflect over this quote by the Soviet legend. From one perspective, it seems to me the burden of deciding who wins an election lies on election officials. Equally persuasive is a perspective which suggests that it is the voter that decides an election. Could it be one or the other? Or could it be both? Whither are we drifting? At rock bottom, however we look at it, this quote seems to sum up the issues that bog our minds on elections and electioneering activities in Ghana. Do you agree with this or you don't?
Well, it's a view expressed, right? I won't necessarily disagree or agree with it. The point...
But you agree with the president?
Well, I'm just saying that if you look at the issues before us, and you know that there is the appearance that, okay, well, independence and all of that, yes. So once you appoint the individual and he goes there, his work becomes public. There isn't any way where you can hear or you see that Akufo-Addo tells him go and do this and he goes to do that. Everything he does will be held to public scrutiny, and I think that the NDC will not miss the opportunity to do so. What I think is problematic is the NDC's own constant act of shooting themselves in the foot. Because you yourself have deselected yourself from going to IPAC to begin with. So when decisions are made, then you stand outside and you are blaming everybody that, well, somehow you cannot be part of, or you are not part of the decision, and therefore you go to Parliament to relitigate a decision or discussion or an agreement that has passed at IPAC. So it's the NDC that is doing this to themselves. To say that we have an institution that relatively Constitution granted the independence of that institution, it is for us as interest stakeholders to make sure that we hold the system to function the way it ought to function. Okay. Now, you can put me as EC, but then I cannot, in broad daylight, say go and have this thing skewed in favor of the MP.
Can you be independent? If something is going wrong, your party will call you. Yeah. They'll say, look, Richard, what's going on? You ought to check this. And you will listen to your party, won't you? But that's the temptation.
But you see, there's an integrity dimension to all of these. And so if that was possible, I'm sure that Madame Charlotte Osei could have listened to calls that may have gone to her, whatever time, to declare the election for the NDC. The thing is such that we have to come and to have confidence in the systems.
Even though Charlotte Osei couldn't do that, do you remember how vehemently you fought her? And people believe up to today that she ought to have been there, but for, a grand agenda to remove her, which was successful.
Well, Samson, I don't see any grand agenda. I can agree with our opposition of her. Also, it's a function of what a democracy is, and in fact has become a legacy of the growth of our process. Because we did that, and we realized that, okay, well, that really is not the outcome. Because when it mattered and Ghanaians made the choice, the counting of it was according to the structures that we put together. So nobody can actually do anything untoward. So that's the confidence they must have, that we all are building a democracy and we are growing to a certain point. So where we have gotten to, the NDC should not be entertaining that fear. They should go to IPAC. They should engage the conversation to say that where they don't understand something, that conversation will be addressed at IPAC. So everybody is comfortable.
So ask yourself, what Richard and the NPP would have been doing if we turned the table and put the NDC in power and put you in opposition. And this appointment was made. You just, a while ago, you said maybe the appearance, and that actually reminds me of a scripture which says, avoid all appearances of evil. 1 Thessalonians somewhere. So it's like conflict of interest. In law, we say avoiding the appearances of it is as important as the actual of it. What would you have been doing? What would you have been saying if the situation was turned around?
Samson, when, and I think up until she left office and was demonstrating recently, the former Chief Justice was seen as a relative of the president, and therefore it was bad that she was appointed. But just recently, we saw that on a principle basis, she can depart, and she departed. So let's not carry this group position to say that, because look, we are all friends. In this country, people know people, right? A minute ago, Honorable Rickett Hagan was talking about people knowing people across the aisle. Is that supposed to prevent us from working? Or so therefore people would sell their integrity and not do what is right? No, it's a matter of concern. You can express that. You make note of it. Society takes account of it, that yes, we see that this person has some leanings towards this political party. But what is healthy that we must encourage is that the system must be policed to work. So if I were the NDC, I would focus my attention on how we strengthen the electoral system, which includes that I go to IPAC. I don't continue to sit outside. So we engage together to mold the system, and so that we can get the outcome.
So Professor Piejetua, I start with you here on this. How do you feel about this? As far as Richard and his team are concerned, it shouldn't matter that much what we are looking at. And as the president said, forget about these people. They don't control anything. And thanks to my church member, Richmond. Richmond sends me 1 Thessalonians 5:22. That's correct.
Exactly.
It says, avoid all appearances of evil. Yes.
Yes. Samson, I was also going to give the quotes. First Thessalonians 5:22.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think in a liberal democratic system like the one we have, elections play a very pivotal role. And at the heart of ensuring the credibility of the election process is the election monitoring system. In this case, our electoral commission. The credibility of the commission is very important. And there's a very useful work done by Frederick Ebert's Foundation on electoral commissions in West Africa. And it concluded that there are two main types of electoral commissions. One appointed based on neutrality, and the other appointed based on sort of proportional representation of party members in the electoral commission, plus some civil society organizations. In fact, the example of Burkina Faso even includes some women's organizations and traditional authorities and so on. Ghana decided to adopt the neutrality system, whereby there shouldn't be any appearance of political attachments of any member to the electoral commission. And that is what we have operated with for a number of years. And that is why it wasn't surprising when Charlotte Osei was appointed. People cried about it and expressed some concerns about it, even to the extent that Richard Delasky at CTFM took the matter to court.
Right.
Unfortunately, the court didn't give justice to the decision regarding whether the advice that should be given by the Council of State. Okay. So it shows that we have operated this system, we have created that tradition. And for a number of years, in fact, some Afrobarometer reports done in 2016, 2006, 2007, indicated that the Electoral Commission was the most trusted institution in Ghana, higher than the government, higher than the judiciary, higher than parliament, and so on.
Afarijan?
And in the same, yes, that's the period of Afarijan. And in the same survey, it also came out that the EC of Ghana is the most trusted EC in the whole of Africa.
That's right.
You know, but if you look at the records now, we are going down in terms of credibility of the EC. In a more recent survey done by Afrobarometer in 2016, the EC is the third most less trusted of the institutions in Africa after Gabon, another country, and then Ghana comes in at 37%. So it tells you that when neutrality is sacrificed, it affects.
Is it reality, or these are perceptions that are pushed by the two parties? If you mention, for example, Charlotte Osei, who had knowledge of Charlotte Osei having any partisan, as it were, connections, properly so to speak? She had been with the NCC, which is also a place where you are supposed to see people who are neutral and can be fair, for many years before she went in there. Yet the NPP, cried hell.
Yes, that's where I'm coming to. That even in the case of Charlotte Osei, NPP was up in arms and strongly opposed that. So if you compare the position of Charlotte Osei with Dr. Appiah Ahene, then you see a clear situation where neutrality has been seriously compromised, because Dr. Appiah Ahene is clearly isolated with, connected with NPP, not to it. And it is, I believe that it was strongly because of that the president in his statement said that it is not about who is voting, but it is it's about who is voting, but it's not about who is counting the.
He was preempting the debate.
Exactly. He was trying to kill the debate and saying that this is where the focus should be. But interestingly, when you look at the stolen verdict written by Dubois after the 1992 elections, this was the position of the NPP, that the success of the votes, why they boycotted the election, was because, and they didn't want to accept the results, was that the INEC at that time was compromised, and there was that political neutrality issue was at stake. So it beats anybody's imagination that the president would today make such a declaration. People are also concerned about the fact that the professional background of this person, an IT person, and in this day and age, when you're talking about elections, IT plays a big role in this. So that is a concern why we shouldn't adopt a positivist approach to this matter, that this is what the law is saying. There's a moralist argument to it, which deals with the question of neutrality. And it's clearly on the face of the record that this person is tainted, and therefore he shouldn't be part of the process.
But
There's
Prof,
already been a number.
But Prof, like judges, if you are appointed a judge, and then you still want to look back and do any favor to anybody, then you are not worthy of that calling, are you? Especially when you have the protection of the law for your office. It's the same protection that people who are appointed to electoral commission have. So we know judges who have been appointed in the US, I mean, you must be appointed because you belong to a particular tradition. And yet, once they are appointed, they disappoint, the government or those who brought them in because they follow the law. Why can't we look at it this way rather than say, once you are tainted politically, when you go there, you will remain the same? It's neutrality. Can people not be neutral and yet impartial?
It's possible. It's possible. But the question is, why don't you put things in the right place to avoid any eventuality? Because if you appoint this person who is neutral, who is politically not neutral, and is aligned to a political party, and then he goes and he doesn't disappoint the appointer, then we have a problem, because we would already have endorsed the person. And if you look at the structure of the EC, there have been questions about the duration in office of such people. When they are brought into office, they remain there for a very long time. And so in that situation, until the person goes on retirement or something, the person will remain there. And we're doing the hard
just like judges,
the one that appointed him. And that is very dangerous. And so we follow tradition. The tradition has been that we are following the neutrality style.
Okay.
And so why change now? Otherwise, we bring in other political parties as well and look at the issue from the number of political parties and the fact that each one should be represented in the INEC.
All right.
Going to IPAC, to me, will not solve the problem, because IPAC itself has had its problems in recent times as well. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Professor Bafo Adjumandia, this neutrality thing, is it not a farce?
It is a farce, Samson. It is. And I'll tell you why it's a farce. The Constitution creates these bodies and says they should be independent. But at the same time, the same Constitution gives the appointing authority to a person who is partisan. You see, if you want a president or the appointive authority to be neutral, then that person must be head of state if you take certain policies into account, not the head of government. But the head of government is a political partisan person. So when we are asking that the appointed individual should be independent in the commission, which is supposedly independent, now at the same time we have a president who is also head of government making that appointment, then you have a serious contradiction there. Having said that, Samson, I think the president's statement that you played for us was a little bit misplaced, you see. And I'm glad that my good friend, Professor Tuahim, has referred to the Tuahim report after the 1992 elections. The attempt to place the emphasis on the person casting the vote rather than the process and the managers of the process, I don't think it's a proper attempt. Because you see, again on the neutrality, you are using, and I'm glad you quoted the Bible. Unfortunately, I'm not biblically inclined. So let me use the layman's word, optics. The optics, when you're talking about neutrality. Even if the person that you're appointing can disappoint you, just like you refer to the American system, where a Supreme Court judge known to be conservative will come on the panel and then, behave otherwise. The optics always raises debate in the United States. Whenever a president is appointing someone known to be A or B, that in itself will raise the debate. And that's what we are experiencing here. So I think presidents or appointing authorities should be very mindful of the optics of the actions or decisions that they make. And this is a clear case. I don't know this Dr. Akiaje, but if what you showed us on the screen not long ago, that he was even a candidate for a ministerial appointment, and I hope that is also true, kind of a thing you show, then of course it will make people wonder why a president will deliberately choose someone who is known to be closely associated with a party. So I think the optics very bad, but at the same time, I will go to the creation of the electoral system that places the appointive authority in the president. In fact, just a day or so ago, the former president, Mahama, had made an interesting point about why not amend that section and compel the president to submit nominees to parliament for approval. Even then, would that work? Just as what we saw yesterday in parliament, will that even cure the problem? No. But you see, there are other models of constituting elections around the world. We can look at various models and make a determined decision. One thing interesting about democracy that all of us tend to miss is that democratic practice is not a straitjacket. The fact that is done in country A doesn't mean it should be done in country B. But we are always adopting systems that do not fit us. So I'm saying that there are various models we can look at. In Bangladesh, for instance, they don't have a standing commission. They have a secretariat. But whenever a year or so to elections, they bring some people together to supervise the whole thing. After that, that commission is dissolved. That's a model. So there are so many things we can look at. Or he cited, my friend cited the case of Burkina Faso, where you bring in various constituencies, their representatives, and they make the decision, they supervise, and you go. So we shouldn't tie ourselves to a system which is supposed to create a neutral body, and yet the one who appoints membership to that body is a partisan. We can assume that the president, once he becomes a president, becomes the father of the nation, becomes a statesman, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't work for us. So, in short, Samson, I think this whole problem we are facing, and we have gone back into history, the case of Charlotte Osei and many others, and to add to what my friend started from the Afrobarometer, there was a time Ghana was hailed as perhaps the leading democracy in the world. Yeah. Recent Afrobarometer reports will indicate that we've slided. And even the support for democracy in Ghana today is not the same as we had in the 2004-2006 Afrobarometer reports. It's gone down from highest 86 to 90 during those years to currently, as I speak to you, hovering around 50%. So we have a challenge, and the challenge is enormous. And I think those who are calling for constitutional reviews should be supported. Unless we revise the power relations that the Constitution has created, we are going to suffer these kinds of aberrations all the time. Samson.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll take a break here, and when we return, I'll share a few of your views with you, and then we will decide. We had tabled 3 issues to discuss, but that was subject to what was going to happen in Parliament. And the big issue came out of Parliament, which we had to deal with. So one of the 2 that is remaining, the investigations into Galamsey, alleged at the presidency and in the party, and the true state of the nation address as presented by the Johnson Esiedun Ketia. We'll have a discussion with our guests to determine which one we postpone. We'll be right back.
What's the true story?
The true story is that at the start of the Operation Vanguard thing, the soldiers were supposed to arrest the excavators. And they go into the forest where they are doing the mining and then remove the control board.
Okay.
So if they remove 20 control boards today, they will report that they have immobilized 20 control boards.
Once they are removed, there's no way those excavators can move.
But then when you go away, they'll bring new control boards and fix them, and then and off they go. So we got a report that they had immobilized over 750 something excavators. So we appointed somebody to go around and check. When we went around, I think we got about 150, 200 that we could see. Okay. The rest had either been given to the owners or
vanished.
They put in some
extra parts
and moved them away.
Okay.
And then somebody put it out there, from Bob Martin has taken 500 square. What am I going to do with it? There was an orchestrated scheme, even within the party and government.
To get you out.
So that, look, why is it when I left, now everybody's in the forest? At that time, you dare not enter the forest.
Yeah.
You know. But as I said, I don't want to go into details now because I have a lot to say on that. But let me tell you that I did not take one excavator for anything. And they know the truth. Now things are coming up. We know those who are behind it, and the party people who are there, people in government, including Jubilee House, who are doing Galamsey and so on, even now.
Right, so that's Professor Frimpong Boateng, former minister, environment, science, technology, and innovation. That is his verdict. Now, just a few of your messages on the back of the matter we just discussed, and then we'll go into that one. This one from Fianco. K. Fianco says, how do you strengthen a political system when all the major officials of elections are party members of the incumbent government? I mean, what is there to strengthen? Is everybody at the EC members of the incumbent government? The president may have had the opportunity, and I think we always need to situate it, may have had the opportunity to appoint, I think for now, those who are there, almost all of them. But that's a duty he has to do, a constitutional duty. Folk Kofi says, in the case of judges, there is opportunity for judicial review. So whatever they do could be subjected to further scrutiny. G. Kofi Amwa says, let not play the ostrich. Unless I'm wrong, but the appointment of the EC is synonymous to the Auditor General. Unless I'm wrong, President Akufo-Addo once said, Domelevo, appointed by John Mahama, owes allegiance to him. If I'm right, Dr. Apiahene owes allegiance to who? That's the question we must ask. What fairness, that's Akban, Steve Akban, says, what fairness and balance do we want with EC when our corrupt parliamentarians are the ones supporting the government to do what they are doing? And a final message, I understand from Dr. Tony Edu, is that elections can be won or lost at the EC strong room. It happened to the 2008 presidential election results. And he says, if you want a debate, let's have it. And I'll show you the evidence. All right. Thank you for those messages. So now, Dr. Frimpong Boateng is in the lights. And the president has now asked the police to investigate his claims that there are people in the party, in government, in the Jubilee House who are involved in Galamsey, and that is why the fight is not being won since he left there. My guests remain Professor Kwadwo Appiah-Tuah. We are joined by Convener Media Coalition Against Illegal Mining, Dr. Ken Ashigbe, and Richard Anyagba is still here together with Felix Kwachi Ofosu. Now, you will say you are vindicated, not so, Felix?
Well, first of all, Samson, don't hold your breath that any substantive outcome will emerge from the supposed investigation that the president has commissioned into the matter by the police. The president has not tended to show evidence that he's ever committed to dealing with any sort of wrongdoing in his government. Perhaps he feels politically pressured because of the weight of allegations made by Professor Frimpong Boateng to be seen to be doing something. But I don't anticipate that despite the culpability or complicity of any member of his government, he will take any action against him. Indeed, if care is not taken, the policemen who make such a finding may find themselves at the receiving end of his retribution, as we have seen him do to people like Dumelovo and the special prosecutor and other people. You see, we didn't require Professor Frimpong Boateng. Perhaps you could say that he's added impetus to those of us who have criticized President Akufo-Addo's botched fight against Galamsey. But we didn't need him to convince us that there was governmental complicity in the Galamsey menace. That is the only reason why it has flourished. If the fight has been wishy-washy and the commitment levels have not been up to scratch, it's only because there are vested interests who hold powerful positions in this government. And therefore, they use their positions to protect those it is that venture into that dastardly crime against Ghana's environment. Professor Frimpong Boateng, I'm sure, was compelled to speak because he feels like he's been thrown under the bus. You recall that when the matter of the 400 or 500 missing excavators came, he came in for some bashing. I suspect that may even have contributed.
After the party here in Sika comment.
Absolutely. And that tape is so glaring. That tape is so glaring. It's such an indictment. Names of people were mentioned. The General Secretary then, John Boydu's name was mentioned.
He says he was set up, it was intended to just.
But the comments were clear. The comments were clear. I mean, if you say party in Yesika, the implication is clear. You don't need any exceptional interpretation skills to be able to decipher what was being discussed. So it gave the impression that this was an activity that had the blessing of the governmental and party apparatus of the MPP. And therefore, we're not going to see the end of that canker anytime soon. Since then, nothing much has transpired. The president has half the power as and when it is convenient. He has engaged in some public relations gimmicks and made commitments that he never intended to keep. So I don't expect that anything much will come out of it, except for the fact that this would appear to vindicate the positions we've taken. That the reason why Galamsey has flourished is that from the highest levels of the Akufo-Addo Bawumia government, they have support. And perhaps the only way to ensure that the fight is won is to see the back of this government electorally come 2024. Otherwise, I don't think that any Ghanaians should live with any sort of expectation that anything will come out of this. Why? Even those who have been indicted, those against whom glaring evidence of wrongdoing and corruption have been tabled, are working scot-free. Show me one MPP person who is facing trial for any form of wrongdoing. And nobody can argue that we do not have evidence of wrongdoing on the part of MPP people. There are people standing trial for far less compared to what MPP people have done and have not been prosecuted. So I don't expect any useful outcome, except that it makes for very, very sad commentary that the seat of government is directly accused of engagement in this.
Richard, we had, when Prof made this comment, we had NDC, bigwigs, including in Parliament, saying this must be investigated, this must be investigated. Now the president says it should be investigated. This is what we are hearing. What do you say?
Well, I think that is good. The president is always, by example, shown that his commitment to ensuring Galamsey is not carried on, remains something to be admired. And I think that the intervention of the former minister in stating some of the facts that he's brought over there, if it's factual, merit the president's directive to want that be looked into. But Felix needs to be very aware of the extent of the entrenchment of the interest in that space, right? So that even under them, the fight against Galamsey was given up. It was entirely, they just gave up on it. I recall very recently when this Madam Aisha Wang issue came up, a member of your party now, probably regional, national organizer of the party, Mr. Joseph Yamin, talked about his encounter with Madam Aisha Wang to say that she was connected with people in higher offices. So there are always interests, but that interest is not equivalent to saying that there's a governmental complicity. I think that is too simplistic for this. Your own national organizer, realizing this thing at personal levels, people Well, people are not holy. Not everybody is holy. There are people who will do bad things, even though their, government position is that let's do right. And the president has been leading this effort. I wouldn't be surprised. I would say that the professor should bring the evidence. If he has it, he should bring it. But I just show you an evidence to say that when Joseph Yamin was a deputy regional minister in Ashanti region, says that he couldn't even touch Ashawa. But then the appearance then was that your government was trying to fight corrupt Galamsey. So why was a minister under former President Mahama wasn't able to point to all the wrong things the woman was doing? She says because of her connection, she can take over people's concessions, take over the equipment forcibly in this country. Yet, government was supposed to be fighting Galamsey under former President Mahama. The point I think, Samson, we should come to is that as a people, all of us are opposed to the continuation of Galamsey. Not that people should not mind, but the manner in which it is done so that it affects and collectively in the long term affect our common existence must be checked. So let's move away from the conversation to say that, oh, it is Akufo-Addo, it is MPP, it is that. Let's look at how we can deal with it at personal level and say that those who are hiding behind, given their proximity, given what appearance of power they have, and those who are peddling influence and going about trying to use those influences to encourage and to advance Galamsey, those are the people we need to deal with. So this recommendation for the issue to be investigated on account of what fact or what statement the professor has made, for me is welcome. Let's follow it. Let's try to make sure that we all take interest in it, because there isn't anyone, apart from the very unpatriotic individuals who are hiding around and profiting from Galamsey. I have not seen any Ghanaian who says that we must encourage Galamsey. So government is fighting it. The president staked his presidency on it. So the point we have gotten to is now is that we need to look at the approach and say, look, it seems to me there may be individuals, and based on what I'm just giving you from Joseph Yamin, when your own effort was underway, is to say that there are individuals whose interest is making all of us lose this fight. And that is what we need to fight. And I think that this investigation could lead us there. So we can all try and come together, understanding that there are bad people in society, and those bad people, we can all work together, depoliticize this matter, and see how is it that common interests can prevail, and we will fight this thing together. So for me, the president's call for further investigation, I think that it should be supported by all.
Dr. Ken Ashigbe, as convener of the Media Coalition Against Illegal Mining, who brought the needed, focus that got the government to, as it were, buy into the campaign and make it a government's campaign. You are worried to hear Professor Frimpong Boateng say what he said, knowing where he sat as the minister and the one under whom the Operation Vanguard began to flush out, the Galamseyers. But do you trust that this call to the police will yield any fruit? I think that's the bigger question.
Well, thank you very much, Samson. And was I surprised at what Prof said? No. And the MPP Ashanti Regional Chairperson of their party, the Minister for Lands and Natural Resources, fingered his company as being involved in this illegality. What has happened to him? We have petitioned the AGs and the police. IGP says he's referred it to the CID Director General. We're waiting for her call, to be able to get that done. The Bosome Freho, MCE, who was caught on tape confessing to a crime. We were told that he was supposed to have gone to meet the Minister for Local Government. What has happened to that? So it is a fact that the only reason why we've not been able to deal...
There was action taken against him. He was dismissed, right?
Samson, you look at the Minerals and Mining Act. The Minerals and Mining Act is the punishment for sinning against, that law dismissal. Samson, you are the lawyer. Just advise me. Advise me. Is that one of the punishments? The person is involved in an illegality. The NPP itself had gotten the punishment, increased. And you were expecting that somebody like this, we would see the sanctions that would apply to the person. What has happened? So the elephant in the room is that the political parties, and it's not just the NPP, the NDC as well, are benefiting from Galamsey. And, we just pretend to want to fight it. And we're not doing anything about it. So if we really want to fight this, we all need to make sure that the hot stove principle acts. And we should be seeing the law as acting. Am I confident that anything would come out of this? Again, as a student of social sciences, I would want to go and look at the results, empirical results of what has happened to all the investigations that had happened in the past. Look at the situation of when Anas did his piece on Galamsey. What did the CID do? I remember even as managing director of graphics, then when there was one guy who then came against the president when he put his, and was out there saying that they were involved in Galamsey. The police did nothing about it. When it comes to the people who really matter,
In fact, I think as far as we know, Charles Bishu, who was involved in that, has said consistently that the police exonerated him, and presently he's actually attacking through legal means, really. The special prosecutor, that he ought not be put before court over that matter.
But that's basically what I'm saying, so that you see very clearly, crime being committed, then the police take it and they whitewash it. You go back and read that report that the police did in whitewashing it. And that's why I'm happy the special prosecutor is going after him. And it's up to Charles to go and defend himself. But it is important that the leadership of this country realize the fact that where we are sitting, we are in an existential crisis. And when you have the chairman of the Interministerial Committee come to tell you that this is what is happening, how would dare anybody doubt what it is that they're doing? Yes, well, we're in a country of a rule of law, so the investigation should happen. But unfortunately, historically, the police, the CID has not given us hope. And I'm telling you about the situation about, Akonta mining, who you have stories done by the media that have provided evidence. And then you have the minister in charge of mining. You have the regulator in charge of mining coming out, and mention the fact that this person is involved in illegally mining in the Anyenini Forest Reserve. If you look at the fact that with him, the people of Samrabway had a class where it had to take the police to go and separate it. And the reason was because they were going in there to mine. There's so much evidence, no prosecution has happened. So it is really important for us to know that as we are sitting on the time bomb. And so we need to go beyond just the rhetoric of saying that this investigation should happen. And I'm hoping that the IGP and the new Director General of CID, we should give her also the benefit of the doubt, should give us that hope to say that something is really going to happen. But my friend who talks about the fact that it's individuals, it's not just individuals. There are individuals who are in charge of institutions. And for one of them is your chairperson of, the Ashanti Regional Chairperson, who is involved in an illegality. And nothing seems to be happening to him. These are the things that embolden the young people to the extent that Gold Stars, you have illegal miners run around, burn equipment, burn their core sheds and all of that. Massive investment that have been done have all gone, gone to waste. And what is happening? The sad thing is I've not even heard the government say anything about this thing, where people who actually have been given the license to mine, you have an attack, marauding mob involved in an illegality, attack them, and nothing has been said about it. So we seem to be supporting rather those who are involved in the illegality. Or no,
but Dr. Ashigbe, what do you want the government to be saying when an illegality has been committed, which the police or the law enforcement must take charge? You are referring to the Golden Star Resources mine, where just last week, illegal miners burnt 12 of their vehicles there, attacked the company. That is crime. Everything,
the whole illegal mining thing is crime. And you see, so our attitude to it, demonstrating to people that we have zero tolerance for it. You know, one of the reasons why for us as a country, we seem to all have come to the consensus, and the elite consensus, that democracy is the thing to do. And so you notice that if once we have anybody show any strength of coming against the democracy, we all come against them. We need the same elite and mass consensus that this issue of Galamsey is so bad that once we see an iota of it, we marshal the same forces. It's the reason why, yes, it's true, the police should be dealing with it. But we should also be seeing, you know, that the state saying that this is wrong. This is something we are not going to condone. And we all will come together. And coming together, you need both the NDC and NPP coming together and say that when it comes to the issues of Galamsey, when it comes to this thing that's an existential threat, we are all united in it and we'll fight it and not play it as the political ping pong just to be able to want to win, you know, favor of the people. Because the thing that happens is that it is just the access that change. The NDC, the NPP, historically, they have not demonstrated to us that really they actually can find it. I have not really watched the Al Jazeera, one. But we are being told of how much gold is leaving our country. The challenges that we face with this economic crisis, if we are able to deal with Galamsey the way we ought to deal with it, you will find out that we'll be able to get resources out of gold to really resolve the challenges that confront us as a country.
All right. Thank you very much. Dr. Ken Ashigbe is the convener for media, the Media Against Coalition Against Illegal Mining. Thank you very much. Let's go to Professor Kwadwo Appiah-Etua. Prof, the issues are coming up that, first of all, whether you trust this process, I think that is the bottom line, that the outcome will be something that we can use. But the question is being asked, why did the police have to wait for the president to ask them to do this? Imagine even if a journalist, not some really very ordinary person, had made a statement and said there was Galamsey going on, people in Galamsey in the Jubilee House. Recently, a journalist, made reference to the First Lady in respect of a property or some construction that was going on, Bobia Ansa. They were arrested. The police picked them up without anybody, calling on them to do anything. So what do you say about that the police had to wait until the president said, can you investigate this matter?
Well, the whole Galamsey thing is a complex activity which involves different actors. And we need to be able to unpack it a little bit to see why the police is sort of inactive when it comes to dealing with the Galamsey issue. But first of all, I agree with the point that not much is going to come out of this call by the president for the police to act, because the police should have acted in the first place. And there have been several calls, Dr. Ashigbe, I know with my good friend, has gone to the police station. I've forgotten the name.
Martin Pebu.
Martin, yes.
Yeah, they filed the petition.
Exactly.
Over the Akonta mining thing.
Yes, and nothing has come out of it. So according to the Mineral Commissions Act, you don't need to wait for any such call from the government or the president before you act. Number two, I am very sure that the president is aware of those who are involved in the Galamsey process. And it has been confirmed by the former minister. And the whole thing is that Galamsey is not just a crime. It is transnational organized crime. It's a crime that cuts across borders. And the proceeds go across borders. Some of the practices, like I say now, it is a complex network of activities. There are networked individuals involved in it, groups that are involved in it. And at the end of the day, transnational organized crime is an activity done for profit. But it involves some facilitative activities which will enable the process to become successful. And there are also some obstructionist activities done by these criminal gangs to be able to obstruct justice through corruption and other activities. So it's not a one-off activity. And so there are those in the front line doing these facilitative works, trying to grease the palm of government officials and others, and those doing the back line work, trying to obstruct justice and making sure that the police is immobilized, just like they try to immobilize these excavators. The police is also immobilized. If you look at the West African system, they are trying to deal with this activity, transnational organized crime. And Galamsey is one of them. If you look at transnational organized crime generally, there are some basic ones which deal with human trafficking and so on. But West Africa has its own forms of unique forms of transnational organized crime. And Galamsey is mentioned as one of them. And when Galamsey takes place, it leads to cohabitation of criminal gangs with politicians. And that is a very dangerous part of it, because politicians are those who are taking care of the affairs of the state. The minerals that you find in the land is now vested in the government in trust for the people of the country. So the government has a responsibility to make sure that these resources are well protected, well exploited, and the resources shared equally among the citizens of the country. But we see a situation where we are not benefiting from that.
So you guys don't trust the police process. What should happen? Meanwhile, you were talking about the devastating nature of Galamsey. So if something has come out, something must be done. So what should happen? And what do you say to those who say you don't really have to trust, Professor Frimpong Boateng that much, because he is saying that people try to, frame him up and got him out of office. So he may be bitter and also want to get at some people.
Yeah, we don't need to really rely on what Professor Frimpong Boateng is saying. But the evidence is there. There's been journalists who have been there. There have been Anas has done some work. Al Jazeera has done some work. Some other environmental organizations I deal with have done some work, Third World Network and so on. So the evidence is there. We don't need Professor Frimpong Boateng to tell us about it. So even if we don't find him credible, what he has said confirms what is already there. So the question is, what do we do about it? Well, I, for one, am doing some project for ECOWAS that deals with transnational organized crime. If you look at the steps, the processes, the structures taking place or put in place to deal with transnational organized crime, they are enormous and they could reap benefits. But at the end of the day, it is about the independence of the police. The police is not independent enough to be able to do this work, because the Galamsey activity and other transnational activities are connected to the highest echelons of governmental power. Some criminals are becoming politically minded, and some politicians are becoming criminally minded. So that sort of collaboration is not good to fight the Galamsey menace. And so it is about time that the police is given that independence. The structure that have been put in place be made to work, so that the Ashawans and the Chamabuntumis and so on can be brought to justice. And that is how I think we can deal with the problem. Well, we can also look at it from the point of view of a human rights-based approach. But the question is, you have to go outside the confines of the country to be able to see what can be done about it. So that is where we are. We seem to be going in a cycle. Much of the, how do I put it? The political system, you remember Osei Chairman Sabonsu, Honorable Member of Parliament, he said that you need about 4 million Ghana cedis, 400 million Ghana cedis to be able to run for a president. Where does the money come from? And here's a situation where we have an EC that is given the power to demand access declaration from political parties when they are registered, when they hold elections, and at the beginning of every 6 months or beginning of any new year, they don't do that. It doesn't do that, perform that. So in that matter, we are not able to check how money goes to these political parties. And we have these political financiers, the godfathers, who are feeding money into the political parties. And at the end of the day, they determine how the government should be run. So until we deal with that
right. I think when the CDD did the research and came out with the fact that to prosecute a successful presidential campaign, you need $100 million. There were suggestions that some tainted galamsey money goes into some of this process. And for an MP, you need 4 million Ghana cedis to be able to prosecute a successful parliamentary campaign. Thank you very much, Professor Kwadwo Appiah Etua and also Dr. Ken Ashigbe for joining us here. We will spend just the few minutes left to get some summary of statements on Johnson Asiedu Nketiah's True State of the Nation address. The show is brought to you by Bank of Africa Strong as a group and close a partner. MTN everywhere you go. Ashasi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 31 years. My Way Insurance, dial *165# on the MTN to join. Duraplus, where Duraplus goes, water flows. DBS Industries, roofing, Fie. Rehoboth Social Housing, your housing dreams become reality. Let's listen just a bit of what Johnson Asiedu Nketiah had to say when his party gathered at the UPSA to present the alternative to the State of the Nation.
Between January and September of 2022, the Akufo-Addo-Bawumia presidency wasted the taxpayers' money as follows. The president's operational enhancement expenditure, whatever that means, cost the suffering Ghanaian taxpayer a mind-boggling 59.4 million Ghana cedis. The fuel bills at the president alone cost the taxpayer 51.1 million Ghana cedis. President Akufo-Addo's regional tours last year cost 16.9 million Ghana cedis. Tires and batteries for official vehicles at the presidency alone cost Ghanaians 15 million Ghana cedis. A cabinet meeting outside Accra cost the taxpayer a colossal 4.8 million Ghana cedis. Payment for new vehicles cost the suffering Ghanaian taxpayer 6.5 million after Nana-Addo had declared that they will not purchase any new vehicles.
Right. We barely can do some 2 minutes of comments each on this. So what's the point? Government must function, and it's money. There are global issues that have led to the economic shocks. You say that's not reality, we shouldn't take that?
Yeah, government must function, but it does not need to waste resources on doing so. The list of expenditure that Chairman Asiedu Nketiah highlighted shows clearly that this government is simply throwing our money away. They are wasting the money. In some instances, I dare say it is being squandered. It's being stolen under the guise of all manner of nebulous nomenclature. What exactly is operational enhancement expenses? What does it mean? And any time that you see that there's some opacity in meaning to anything that government says, you know that there's corruption going on.
So you seek explanation.
So why do we need to ask before it is explained? Why they've spoken about car tires and fuel and all that. That one is pretty clear. You can even question the amounts. But what exactly is operation? What operations were enhanced? And in what way? What were the outcomes? So you know that there's corruption right there that is being hidden under some fanciful technology.
And you see the blame on COVID and Russia, Ukraine.
You see something. Check around West Africa. Our neighbors, some of whom we had a stronger economy than before COVID struck. None of them are going through the suffering that we are going through. None of them has had to expropriate 82 billion Ghana cedis from domestic bondholders. None of them has their currency as destroyed as ours. None of them has debt close to what we have. None of them has debt to GDP ratio close to what we have. None of them has a sort of interest rates we have. None of them have the deficits we have. So it has nothing to do with COVID. What they did was that for them, COVID was an excuse to break the bank in order to win elections. And it is that effort to win elections at all costs that has brought us here. So they are only hiding behind the global crisis. If COVID was just an epidemic, then you could say that it was restricted to Ghana. But even Guinea-Bissau, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Burkina Faso, these are countries that were relatively weaker than we are. They don't have the sort of economic crisis that we have. So I think that we should stop the COVID excuse. It makes no sense to trumpet an excuse that has been long discredited. If you like, take the figures. The whole of Sub-Saharan Africa, we have the worst economic outings. So COVID did not affect just Ghana. It affected every country in the world. And yet we have these outings. What we have had is that long before COVID struck, this government was off track. That is why the World Bank country director, Mr. Pierre Laporte, made the point that the economy was mismanaged long before COVID struck. By 2019, our deficits were going out of gear. Our debt had reached 70% of GDP already. Our currency had suffered about 13.9% depreciation. Indeed, the whole of last year, the first 10 months of last year, it depreciated by 54%. At the beginning of this year alone, first 3 months, it has gone down by 20%.
But the same institution has come to tell us that it was exogenous shocks.
No, it is the IMF.
That has led to. That's the IMF.
Yeah, the IMF does not have an interest in deepening our woes by engaging in commentary that shows that the thing is bad. But the figures are clear. So but your debt has risen from 120 billion to 600 billion. What do you need?
If you listen to Johnson Esiedu Nketia and the manner in which he isolated the issues and took them one by one, it sounds very convincing that the president is completely out of touch when he brought this State of the Nation.
Samson, interestingly, that statement the chairman gave is a sum total of what the NDC has been talking about. It sounded to me like Phyllis contributors, Amija, and the rest, just their talking point is what they put together. Essentially that. But you see, Phyllis talked about the debt, that our debt is 600 something. I just was doing some calculation here. Let's look at it, right? When you're looking at our debt, you don't talk about the nominal addition, because that's what they did in their paper.
How?
Wait. It's not empirical.
How?
That's not how you do it, because...
So that's how it's done.
Yeah, that's not. You see, the 1 CD of yesterday is not the same thing. The purchasing power, in terms of purchasing power, it's not the same thing. So if you go back, even way back to President Kufuor, the debt accumulation of our country, the NDC stands alone in terms of increasing our debt. In 2014, and this is factual, in 2014, NDC added 50% to our debt stock. In fact, Samson, if our debt was 5 or 10 billion in 2014, NDC added 5 billion to it. That's where you measure to see who is adding to our debt. Look, let me show.
Billion to
well, yeah, so that's why you have to look at it from. Wait. So please.
Sorry.
Wait, we don't have time.
It's not just about me, so allow me.
You understand? All right. So Samson, let me just tell you, in terms of rate of change, in the accumulation of our debt, the NDC has added to our debt. So the debt problem we have is actually because of the NDC's borrowing. We have had to manage that debt. Look. Yes, look. The NDC tell you, no, please. No, it's plain paper. I can just show it to you.
So one
please.
600 billion.
Yes, because really, yes, if you look at it in nominal terms, the way they are
don't listen to
him. Yeah, so you see, they said they left office with 120 billion, 122, depending on what exchange rate you use. Now, if you do the rate of change with that, you come up to 1,184% debt accumulation under the NDC. This is Bank of Ghana numbers, okay? So please, it's not me doing that. When you're talking about voodoo calculation. No, please. This Bank of Ghana number. So the only thing is that the NDC has refused to take responsibility. And because we are in government, the burden falls on us. So the 600,000 or the debt position that we have now, it is not because the MPP has overborrowed. Let me show you.
So who did the borrowing?
So wait. The current debt situation we have since MPP came to government, and they said they left to 120. This is the rate of accumulation. The rate of accumulation under the MPP, which is what they are saying is sinful, is 371.3% in terms of debt.
Simple.
You can just please.
Is it worse than 600 billion? I mean, how can you do? Oh, really?
Yes,
what purchasing power? Please.
And
who is in charge of
it? Wait, please.
Samson, who is in charge of the purchasing power? But the analysis you are doing is completely
it's not
surprised. You are dealing with the raw figures. He's dealing with the rates.
No,
you deal with the percentage of revenue that you used to service your debt. That is actually why
can you control him? So you see, these are real numbers. And if you look at the document they presented, the analysis they did, they are using nominal numbers. So the example I give you is that the cost of freight in 2019, okay, the same volume of carriage is now in excess of $12,000. So the $3,000 of 2019 is not the same as 12,000 today.
If you're
I'm sorry, but we have run out of time.
So in actual fact, the NDC had added to our debt much more. So it's not true.
Right.
If anybody tells you,
time is up. I'm sorry. Time is up. And as we agreed, this has to be for another day. Thank you all very much.
No problem.
This has been Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And my guests who are last to leave us, Richard Ahiagba and Felix Kwachi Ofosu. I'm Samson, Lardy, Anyenini. This show has been brought to you by the candid sponsorship of Bank of Africa, MTN, Ashasi University, Duroplast, My Way Insurance, DBS Industries, and Rehoboth Social Housing. Join us again next week for an interesting edition of the show. Join me tomorrow at 2 p.m. on The Law, where I'm very comfortable sharing my knowledge with you. I got a flight to catch for Mrs. Mary Magdalene Bafweje's funeral in KNUST. Have a good afternoon.